Right, in lesson 62, we're going to talk about evaluating roots, or in other words, square roots. Now, we've already talked about examples like this. If I had the square root symbol, or in other words, the square root of 4, which means what number times itself is 4, that would be 2. Remember that when there's not a number in that little hook, it means a square root. We don't need to put the 2 in there meaning square root, because the square root is used so often in algebra and some of the math classes that you're probably going to take. Now, if you had this situation where you had a 3 in there, this would be what's called the cubed root. And you'd ask yourself, what number times itself 3 times is 8? And you might if you tried 1 times 1 times 1, well, that's just 1. So you go a little higher. 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8. So the cubed root of 8 then would be 2. And those are some of the examples that we've already talked about. Now let's take a look at example 1, and let's just reinforce some of these. Now, in the first example, that's one that we just did on the previous screen. So we would read this as the cubed root of 8. So in other words, what number times itself 3 times is 8? And the answer to that would be 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 would be 8. Now the next one would be the fourth root of 81. What number times itself 4 times would give you 81? Well, we know you just got to really try this and trial and error it. So in other words, if I try 2, let's try multiplying 2 times itself 4 times. Let's see, 2 times 2 is 4, and then 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. I'm a little low on that. So you might go a little higher on that. You might try 3. Now, since on the last one we only got 16, I got to go quite a bit higher. So instead of trying 3, I might try 4. So if I take 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. 4 times 4 is 16. 16 times 4 is 64. So this time it's going to be a little high, isn't it? So that means then it's probably going to be 3. So let's try 3 just to make sure. And we'll take 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. And then 27 times 3, and we can see we get our 81. So what is the fourth root of 81? It would be 3. Now sometimes the number inside that radical is what we are really referring to, is negative. Right? So it still means the same thing. So in the last example, we want to know what the cubed root of a negative 27 is. So what number could I take times itself 3 times and get a negative 27? And since it's a negative number, I know that it's a negative, my answer is going to be negative. The number that I have to multiply times itself 3 times has to be negative. So let's try one. Let's try a negative 3 times a negative 3 times a negative 3. Well, a negative 3 times a negative 3 is 9, and then 9 times a negative 3 is a negative 27. So what's the cubed root of a negative 27? It's a negative 3. All right, example 2. Now we're combining these. We're adding more than just one radical or root. So let's take a look at this example. They want us to find the answer to it. Now, before we subtract, we got to do our radicals, our roots. Now, just like you remember your order of operations, which is PEMDAS, and remember what these stand for. So the P is parentheses. So remember, when we evaluate something, we got to make sure we follow the order of operations. So we do any parentheses first. Well, there are none here. We do any exponents. Well, you could really look at these roots and think of them as exponents. So that is what we have to do. And then we do any multiplication or division, and then we do any addition, subtraction. So the square root of 81, let's see, what number times itself is 81? That would be 9 minus, and then what's the square root of 144? Let's see, it's a pretty high number, so let's see, 8 times 8 is 64, 9 times 9 is 81, 10 times 10 is 100, 11 times 11 is 121, and 12 times 12 is 144. So the square root of 144 is 12. Now, take 9 minus 12, and we get a negative 3. All right, the last type of example that we're going to do here in example 3, and actually I have one more of those in example 4, is to evaluate. Now we're kind of combining everything here. So what I need to do before I do any adding or subtracting is I need to do the exponents, and I need to do the roots on this. Now you'll notice kind of a weird looking symbol here, and that is that symbol right there. And notice I have a plus and minus sign doubled up. So what this really means is we're going to get two answers on this because what this problem really means, it means the opposite of 2 squared plus a negative 3 squared plus radical 4, or the square root of 4. So that's one problem where I just take the plus sign right there. Now the other problem, the other type of problem with what this means is this. The opposite of 2 squared plus a negative 3 squared minus radical 4. All right, so I've got two types of problems, and why do they do this? Why do they do this is, well, so you don't have to write it out two different ways. It just saves time. So one of the problems I'm going to use the plus symbol, and the other problem I'm going to use the minus symbol, as I show it below in the blue and the red. So let's do the blue here first. Now remember, when a number is not in parentheses, it means I'm going to square the 2 and then take the opposite of that answer. So 2 squared is 4, the opposite of 4 is a negative 4, plus, now if the number is in parentheses, you square what is in parentheses. So here I'm going to take a negative 3 times a negative 3, which is a positive 9, plus the square root of 4, which is 2. Now I just do my addition. So it's 4 degrees below 0, it goes up 9, that's 5, and 5 plus 2 is 7. So one of my answers is 7. Now let's do the red part. It's almost the same thing, except I'm going to subtract, right? So the opposite of 2 squared we said was a negative 4 plus 9 minus 2 this time. So the temperature is 4 degrees below 0, it goes up 9, that's 5, and what's 5 minus 2? And I get 3. So what's the answer to this problem? Well, it's two answers, 7 and 3. I have two answers. So whenever you see this sign, you might as well just say to yourself, hey, I'm going to have two answers on this. Let's do one more example like that. So just to make sure we're clear on this, I'm going to write it out the two different ways. So I have the opposite of 1 squared plus a negative 2 squared plus radical 9. And then I'm going to write it out using the minus symbol. So I have the opposite of 1 squared plus a negative 2 squared minus radical 9. So now I'm going to evaluate these two problems. So when I don't have parentheses, you're going to square the number and take the opposite of it. So let's see, 1 squared is 1. What's the opposite of 1? Negative 1 plus, when I do have parentheses, square what's in the parentheses. So what's a negative 2 times a negative 2? 4. Plus, what's the square root of 9? 3. Now find the answer to that. And let's see, a negative 1, I could just add these right here, my positive, so it's a negative 1 plus 7, which would be 6. All right, let's do the blue. So I have a negative 1 plus 4 minus 3. Let's see, temperature drops 1, it's 1 below, goes up 4, so that would be 3. So out of this I have 3, now take away 3, so I get 0. So my two answers are 6 and 0. In this lesson then we've talked about more specific types of examples using radicals, or in other words roots.